A warm welcome to our bonus lesson on Thank You for Breaking Up With Me. I am so excited that we have run this race pretty well. We did 3 great lessons, 3 great conversations. We began by talking about pain, the pain of breakups, where it comes from, and the things that add to the pain. We went on to talk about the intensive care of breakups, just acknowledging the fact that there are times when you're going to have to be intensive about your care and also strategic about it. And last week we spoke about how to bag your manure, the lessons learned, how to move forward. So in today's bonus conversation, I am so excited to have Mr. and Mrs. Maronga, Tendai and Fungisai joining me on set for this wonderful conversation. So welcome to the two of you.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you
so and I will ask you to just help us get to know you better. When we had our first conversation, of course, you'll remember the beautiful and very strong Mrs. M. Fungisai, who I said to you, listen, you just have to tell me if you want her back. You spoke, you placed the demands. She's back, but she didn't come alone. She came with her dear husband. I'm just going to ask you to tell us a little bit more about yourselves.
Well, I'm the other half. Tendai Maronga, known to some as Rongis, others Mr. M. I go by a lot of names. We are both content creators. I usually tend to be behind the camera and in front.
Hello.
We love creating content that changes the narrative, that inspires people to do things differently.
Yeah, so I think he's basically said everything. We are each other's better halves, content creators at heart, and in what we do, we run Margaret James Creations. If you're looking out, you can catch us on Facebook and Instagram and see some of our work there. And I think Margaret James is a beautiful story in itself because it brings out the best in both of us. Awesome. And we definitely believe that any content worth creating is content that glorifies God.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'm excited to tell you what Margaret James has done for me as we continue with our conversations and our learnings on these beautiful platforms. But focusing on our bonus lesson today, we want to go into a discussion around relationships that don't work. We've pretty much covered a lot of things around breakups, but I think that it's also important for us to acknowledge that there are relationships that do not work. We could get into talking about toxic relationships and then also how to disengage or how to move on productively, as it were. Matthew chapter 10 and verse 6, the Lord Jesus Christ was telling his disciples that he was sending them out as sheep amongst the wolves. He goes on to tell them that be as wise as a serpent and as gentle as a dove. And I think one of the things that I do want us to achieve in this particular conversation is to bring about that balance, because I think a lot of the times people feel like their wisdom is compromised if they still are as gentle as a dove. And I think the dove really represents and is used in the Gospels as a symbol of the Holy Spirit. And I begin to think about it as preserving the fruit of the Spirit. So how do I be as wise as a serpent? How do I be wise about my relationships? How do I be wise about preserving my identity, my worth, my value, my authority, but still be gentle? So it is important for us to cover this just so that we can walk in the fullness of who God has called us to be. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Question is, are you ready for this? Because one of the reasons I love to have conversations with the Marongas is, I'll let them speak for themselves, maybe in answering this question, and you'll find out why I love to have conversations with them. But maybe the question whose answer I'm looking for is really, when you consider your story, and I mean, like, some people have had the privilege of listening to your story, your journey, what is that one thing that you feel is important, like stepping back or looking at all that God has preserved your relationship, your marriage through, and brought you to this place? What is that thing that you feel you bring into preservation of marriages, of relationships? What do people need to know?
Personally, I always say this, that when we were starting off in our journey, if we had someone who was as brutally honest with us, it would have saved us so much pain and so much hurt. And that's why we believe in no holding back. We believe in telling it as it is and sharing our journey the way we went through it. Some people think it's too much, some people think it's too raw, but the idea is not, if you think it's too much or too raw, then it's not for you. But it is definitely for the person who needs to hear it, the person who's crying by themselves, who thinks they're the only ones who've been through this. Because for a time, I had never been exposed to anyone who had been through what I had been through. And the honest truth is, we go through the same things, maybe differently, but they are the same. And it's important to be brutally honest, because then that helps people the right way.
So absolutely. I mean, before we go to Tendai, it is already one of the reasons I really love them is just how authentic they are in terms of like what they bring to these discussions, to healing, to this, to topics that people silently suffer from. And I think one of the things that we even started these conversations off with was asking that question. Like, I think you remember I asked both yourself and Dara, like, what does it feel like to be talking about breakups? In that there are so many things that have been so heavily censored that people are not talking about them, and they're suffering in silence. So thank you for the gift that you are to this generation in facilitating healing.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things about our journey was that I've come to learn is forgiveness and patience. It's easy to forgive someone who's wronged you. It looks like it's hard, but you find it's easy. But it's really hard sometimes to forgive yourself when you are the one who's caused the pain. And in the case of like me and Fungi's relationship, a lot of the time I could, she'd forgive me or I would forgive her. But one of the things that was hard was forgiving myself for either allowing that mistake to happen and then learning later on that had I been a bit more patient, maybe things wouldn't have been so drastic. So one of the things we've come to learn over the years is we wish we had someone who was brutally honest with us. We wish that we had learned patience and forgiveness quite early, and because that's what has kept us later on in the years. It's forgiving each other on a daily basis,
and being patient with each other. And I think because really today we are talking about like we're talking about wrong relationships, but I think we're also talking about like when things go wrong in relationships and how we can survive, how we can pick up the pieces and create safety for us to find our healing and moving forward. And I love how you talk about patience and forgiveness, because isn't it so true that we often simply just meet people in some process of their growth or a process of their becoming, and sometimes the episode of my life that you might have met me might not be the very pretty one, but it certainly doesn't speak of what the end will be, particularly when people are making the right investments and they're learning and growing. Okay, great, awesome. So let's talk about wrong relationships. And I think when I was thinking about what this conversation would look like, I was pretty much saying to myself that I think we pretty much all know what a wrong relationship is, because those are the relationships that we hide or we try to justify. So we already know that they're wrong. But maybe in talking about like what are these wrong relationships, maybe we could also extend our insights into like what is it that appetizes us? Like, why do you go for the things that are wrong? I mean, I know that eating a lot of fries is wrong for my body, but there's something about those fries that serve as comfort food, you know, and they make me feel warm and fuzzy inside, but then they don't do good for my body. And so we find ourselves in that place. And I think the Apostle Paul makes a statement about how he does the things that he shouldn't do and the like. So what are these wrong relationships? Why do we go into them?
Okay, so I think wrong relationships, I'll just put one out there, is definitely being in a relationship with someone who's already committed. Being in a relationship with a married person. You could be a young man who's dating a married woman.
Does that happen?
It does.
Do men date married women?
It happens quite a lot. It happens quite a lot. And you could be a young woman dating a married man. That is, apart from the fact that we all know it's wrong, but it is a wrong relationship. I think people don't appreciate the extent, the damage such kind of a relationship does, not only to you, but to everyone else around that relationship. And why do people get into those relationships? I think it's because people don't understand what love really means. I have met so many people who have said stuff like, well, you know, married men just love me. Or this guy loves me, and they stay in that relationship because they strongly believe that this person that they're with loves them and they're in love with them and they don't have control over that affection. And yet that is such a wrong perception, because the Word of God clearly tells us that He has given us authority over all things and that love is a choice. For me to be with Mr. Maranga still, after everything we've been through, after 13 years, it's a choice. For me to wake up in the morning loving him is a choice. I choose to love him every day.
So you can't go by what it makes you feel being in a wrong relationship, even if the person is committed and it feels good. It can't be a feeling that you ride on.
No, not at all. Because one thing you definitely have to understand is that because you choose to love someone, you have the power to choose to love someone. You can also have the power not to. You have the authority not to be in such a relationship. Those are the kinds of people that we are. We were created to be beings of authority, beings that take charge and responsibility for their actions. So whenever we go into certain relationships because they love me, then we are no longer in authority. We become slaves to our affections.
Yeah, but then also, I think it also calls for us to then define what love is, isn't it? Because and this is why knowing God is such a critical element of us living this abundant life that we keep wanting to say, have the abundant life, don't sell yourself short, right? So what does love really mean? Because surely love talks about preservation. And so if you're going to be in a relationship with someone who can only talk to you when they're in the toilet, you know, or they have to take a walk to behind the house in order to talk to you, or in a relationship with somebody who saves you as John the mechanic.
Exactly. Or when you're apparently having quality time and then the wife calls or the husband calls, they hush you up.
Right.
Because they're about to answer the most important person in their lives.
Right. The one that they don't have to hide.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
I think sometimes also we find ourselves in some of these relationships because we think like what Funke said, that love, people probably don't understand what love is, and this comes from maybe not having met the first relationship you should have been in the first place, which is your relationship with God. I realized over the years that a lot of things that went amok in some of my relationships were because I didn't work on my relationship with God. So I didn't have a good understanding of how to handle any other relationship that was important anyway to me, which was even including my marriage at some point, So it is important that to understand what God's love looks like.
Right.
You know, because
Yes.
if you have that picture
Yes.
that God is merciful, because I think sometimes, you know, as Christians we have this thought that God is this whip. Once you mess up, you know, He's about to lash you some, you know, and yet, you know, he's always waiting, open arms. Even when you are making that mistake, He's next to you, hoping that you are going to, in the last minute, just say, you know, God, you know, I can't go ahead with this, and please, God, forgive me, and move away before things go to, you know, unmanageable places.
Yeah. So in other words, what you're saying, Tinda, is the fact that there is, you know, for us to picture God being available to rescue us from that situation, that mercies are available, that you can make that turnaround, and you don't have to convict yourself to a certain identity just because you've messed up, or just because you've been tempted, or just because you are feeling a certain way. Because I think we do, sorry, Fungisa, also I think like we do tend to now start to place a lot of value on wrong relationships because of how they make us feel. And sometimes I think that feeling is like just a hunger for a void that we have, that we feel like can only be filled by someone who's committed already. And also, like, can we also just put it out there that commitment talks about people who are married, but also people who are in relationships as well.
Yes, that's true. Another thing I wanted to stress on was the fact that people get into some of these wrong relationships as a form of an escape. Like, for example, if you're married and you are seeking relationships outside your marriage, I know a lot of people who have said it, and for me as well, at some point that outside relationship served as an escape from things that I was refusing to deal with. So I needed a quick fix, almost like a drug to give me a high for a particular time, and then obviously it will with those highs you have low lows. So when you have your fix of your side chick or your side boo, when that fix is done, the low lows is, what have I just done?
What have I just done?
How do I keep up with this?
So it's not, so the relationship is really not going to work if you can't give it what is valuable in it, right? If it's a fix, if it's an escape, you know, it
will definitely struggle. And I mean, I've come across some people, ladies in particular, who say, you know, I can't move on because this guy is the only person who loves my child, or the only person who's accepted me because, you know, I've got two children from different men, or something like that. And yet, like I said, like I mentioned about God's love, you know, men, we are created in God's image, you know. So naturally, we have the ability to love women as they are. That's why, you know, there are those women where people say, how did that girl get married? You know? A lot of those guys know. They know the history. We talk. As much as women talk, men talk too. So, you know, we will know that, okay, she's got a past, but, you know, that's not what I'm looking for when I see it. That's not what I see. You know, I can see beyond, you know, the prostitute that's washing Jesus' feet. You know, Jesus saw beyond that. And that's just how we are. So the fact that he's got 2 children, 3 children, is different. If I am convinced that this is the woman I'm going to build a life with, I will be loyal and loving to that. A good example is that I love Manchester United since I was like, I don't know how old. So we are loyal.
You're loyal.
We're loyal.
I don't know about you, but that felt so liberating, so good to hear. That you have the ability to love a woman as she is. So for that person who feels like, you know, this is as good as it's gonna get for me. All I'll ever have, like if I'm gonna be somebody's side chick, because maybe I've disqualified myself, I've had children, I've made mistakes. Here is Mr. Baronga letting you know that every man carries the heart of God that allows him to love a woman. And in fact, Jesus Christ likens his relationship with the church as the one that is there between a man and a woman, where the man cleanses and preserves this woman and then presents the woman back to himself. So I think that is just such a beautiful thing for us to know. We're going to get into talking about toxic relations. I can see your wife here has got a big smile because you've just like ministered to every woman who's listening to this.
You said that. I
Yes.
really am like, I've heard so many women cry about their past, about
Yes.
I have 3 children with 3 different men. Where am I going to find a man who's going to love me?
Right.
You know, a man who supposedly doesn't have baggage, who's going to take me as I am. And thank you, honey, for just saying that, that you are able to see beyond.
Yeah.
You love them. You love us as we are.
Yes.
You know, we don't have to put on a facade.
Right.
We can come to you as you are.
Yeah.
And I love the notion of how Jesus Christ cleanses the church and presents it back to himself.
In
And
fact, he
that's
cleanses the church for himself.
for himself.
Yes.
And that's exactly what Mr. Maranga is saying, that I don't care about your past. Like,
Yeah.
there are women, there
Yeah.
are women who actually say, but I've been good, I'm a virgin, and
Yeah.
I'm not married, and that girl, she sleeps around with everyone, and
But she
now
got a
she's
good
married.
man.
She
Yeah.
got a good man. How
Yeah.
does that happen?
Yeah.
And it's because of that.
Yeah.
It's because of the fact that men have the ability to see beyond and to love us as we are in
Yes.
whatever season or whatever, like you said earlier on, whatever
Episode
stage,
of
whatever
your life.
episode
Yeah.
of my
Within.
season
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love. I'm so glad you said that.
So, because I think then we're going to have a conversation about what does it look like for a man to preserve a woman, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's such a key topic. Please drop in our message box below if you want us to have a conversation around what it takes. What is the core of a man in terms of what is it that God has assigned a man to fulfill in a woman's life? Because I think that Hate and I, we have a lot of messaging to correct, and I keep saying this, that the wrong messaging has gone out. So even when you talk about this, I'm sure a lot of women are sitting back and thinking, that can't be true. Or some men are sitting there thinking that is not even possible for me to love to that extent. But it is possible. It's just that the wrong message has gone out, and we need to fix it. Okay. So, talking about wrong relationships, so we talked about like making sure that you don't get yourself involved with someone who is committed. And my 2 guests have been able to show you like why do we get ourselves into those relationships. But we've also talked about the fact that you are valuable, so you don't disqualify yourself. And remember that your value is in who God says that you are. So you don't have to mark yourself down, put yourself on sale to be the side chick.
Yeah, that's so true. I love that.
Okay, and another great, another example rather of like wrong relationships, I think would be where there's a misalignment of values and beliefs. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think where values are concerned, values are important because they are predetermined beliefs. So if as a couple you have your values in place, whenever you face a situation, there are things you will never have to debate. Your values will speak for you. Your values will say, we don't do this. We are not going to fornicate. We're not going to behave in a certain way because we already have a set of values. Now, I think that sometimes people will compromise and allow themselves to be with people whose values misalign. And so they start to feel compromised, right?
Yes.
And then in terms of belief system as well, the Bible is it 1st or 2nd Corinthians? 2 Corinthians 6:14 says that do not be unequally yoked to an unbeliever, for what fellowship has light and darkness. And I think that is critical because when you think about our spiritual beliefs, our spirituality governs who we are because it forms our true identity. So when you are compromised in your identity, you're compromised in the quality of your relationship. Do you guys want to talk a little bit more about that?
I think one thing I've realized, or rather equally looking at our story, we got married very young. So as a man, I didn't really list down what
is young?
Wow, 19.
19.
Yes, by all standards around anyway.
Yeah.
We got married when we were 19. So I realized that as a man, I never like really listed what my values were per
Right.
se, you know. And as a result, that caused a lot of chaos in the middle of our marriage at some point. It's because there was no structure to say, okay, you know, do I value integrity? Are we really, you know, as a man, I'm trusted with priesthood. Am I going to be making sure everyone goes to church on Sunday,
Yeah.
or and things like that? So I didn't have a predefined set of values,
Right.
and the danger with not having values at all. Already, that's going to be a difficult relationship.
Anything goes.
You
Yeah.
know. So had I met my wife with a certain sound set of values, we were definitely going to have problems.
Yeah.
But I would then also question her values, because for her to stick around in that relationship with me means there is a value system that is questionable. Because something for you, if it's in your DNA that you don't, purity is high
Yes.
on your list, it's going to be hard for you to go against purity. The moment
Yeah.
someone just says this, it's already a deal breaker. No matter how
Yeah.
every other tick is
Yes.
tick positive, you're not going to compromise on that. So I think a lot of the time, as young people, we don't really have a certain set of values or
Of values,
principles that
yeah.
we really live by. We are always a little bit on the fence on a couple of them, you know.
Yes.
We can easily cross over.
Yeah.
And that's why we end up in these relationships, which we know from the beginning that I'm gonna have a problem with
With
this,
it, yeah.
but we just wanna wing it, so to
Yes,
speak.
and then maybe also people are not doing relationships the right way
Yeah.
that allow for values to be exposed, right? So, and one of the reasons courtship is very important is that it facilitates a platform that allows you to talk about the things that matter to you and to see if you really are aligned in your values.
Yeah.
Do the things that matter to me also matter
Matter
to
to
you?
you, yeah.
Because if I'm going to be in a relationship where the things that matter most to me don't matter to the other person, I'm not going to be satisfied. I'm going to feel empty in the relationship, right? And then I think also doing courtship right also exposes values, because I think it's one thing for someone who's on a mission to get the girl or get the guy, say, oh, you believe in that, me too. You believe in that, me too. You know, and then you start to discover when it's almost too late, or when your relationship is so advanced that actually those were not his values or her values. And so I think a learning opportunity for us is also to talk about the importance of doing courtship well, so that we can discuss values, learn values, align values, but also expose values, and you have an opportunity to walk out of a relationship where there is a misalignment.
Yes,
as
that's
well.
true. I personally believe that when you are in courtship, it's so important for you, whether you're a man or a woman, to allow God to speak during that courtship. Allow yourself to hear Him and follow instructions. I think it's so key, because during that time, it's a very critical period in your relationship. You're courting to get married, right? And marriage is the most important relationship you will ever have, because it is connected to your destiny, to fulfilling purpose.
Yes.
So if that is how important marriage is, courtship is equally important. It needs you to be alert, sober-minded, not drunk in love,
Not
you know,
intoxicated.
not
Intoxicated,
intoxicated,
yeah.
you know. So I think it's so important. I said drunk in love because there is a song like that out there, and I know a lot of people like it.
We don't know that.
So anyway, back to what I was saying. I think it's important to be alert, sober-minded, not intoxicated, because it is in that period that God begins to reveal certain things that need work.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you are not paying attention, or you are paying attention, but like you said, I'll wing it,
Yeah.
you are definitely going to have problems going forward.
And I think even as speaking, you know, from a man's perspective, a lot of men only start wanting to have a vision when they are married, you know, and yet you should have had that vision before.
Right.
And something that I would have then presented to my significant other, that look, this is what, you know, God has put in my heart for the vision of the Maronga family. You know, this is because already in your vision will come your values, possibly even some pillars. You've got it all, you know, planned out. You know, well, not perfectly, but there is something that you know, God has deposited in your heart, and that's what your spouse will buy into, because you know that's actually where purpose is now heading to, if anything. So a lot of the time we find ourselves without vision, and because we are without vision, we are like, you know, blind people directing each other.
I personally believe that during courtship, God will reveal to you what needs work, and He will reveal to you what needs work, and then you make a decision. Do I want to wait, or do I want to go ahead and get married and then fix this ahead? You know?
So anyway, it's going to need fixing. So you choose when to fix it.
When to fix it. So do you want to wait? Because the problem that I believe is there now in society with so many people is because we all want to get married. We want to have the status of being Mrs. Somebody and have the respect that comes with being Mrs. Somebody. But marriage will come, definitely, without a doubt. I think what people don't want to do is wait. People are impatient. So they're going to say, okay, is he a Christian? Yes. He's a man of God. Okay, yes. His values look good. Okay, fine, I can work with that. But you've already been given like hints to what needs to be addressed. I mean, when Tendai and I, before we got married, we had been dating for 4 months. In those 4 months, I can tell you now that there are things that I had already pinpointed that were going to be problems for me in the future. But because I was so desperate to belong to someone, to be a Mrs. Someone,
At 19,
I overlooked that, and I said, you know what? It's fine. We'll be married. We'll fix it inside. You know, and yet when it's now inside, it's 10 times harder.
And 10 times realer, because you live with it, you wake up with it, you sleep with it. And people kind of think that, you know, like the ring changes the person. Like, oh, at least we're getting married, but the problem just moves in, right? So I think also, like, we're starting to realize here, and I know we got into courtship, but, you know, hey, it's a bonus lesson and we can take it any way we want to. But I think also just realizing that there is so much work to do during your courtship, or some people call it dating. During your courtship period, there's so much work that you need to do, and I think people get so tempted to want to become intimate or sexually involved because they feel like if we're not, you know, touching and sleeping with each other, then what are we going to do? And I think that the two of you have already shown us that there is so much work that needs to be done, that needs patience, but also needs commitment if we're going to be able to build each other up and align to our values. Because we're saying that even when it looks like one doesn't have values simply because they haven't been taught, they can still be built, and they can be built over time during the courtship period, as long as one is willing.
That's true.
Let's talk about toxic relationships. What are toxic relationships? So I find like there's so many phrases around relationships that I keep hearing, and I am always like having to look it up. The other time you said you spoke about ghosting. I called it roasting at some point. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but then there's all these different things. People are in situationships and stuff like that. But then there's like toxic relationships, and I think it really speaks a lot into like relationships that contaminate us. So like, why shouldn't we be in toxic relationships? What do toxic relationships look like? How do we handle them? Like, can we just go into that whole space? Are there times when we ourselves are toxic in relationships? I know I've thrown quite a lot at you, but you can just take us through that.
Wow. I think toxic relationships, you know, when something is I can liken it to like a stain, you know. When you just drop a little dot, and then if you don't address it there and there, it, you know, keeps on expanding and expanding that way. And a lot of the times we don't realize that the relationship is toxic because, like you said, we're probably also intoxicated.
Wait a minute. So you can be in a toxic relationship and not realize that you're in a toxic relationship because you've become intoxicated. So your state now becomes normal.
Yes.
It becomes normal to be in a relationship that's manipulative, abusive.
All of those things.
Because you've become intoxicated.
Exactly.
Okay, just wanted to highlight that.
You get to a place where you need to sort of pause and have a look at it from a different perspective. So half the time is when you're intoxicated, it's like talking to intoxication even for someone who's drunk, You tell someone who's drunk, walk the straight line.
Right.
You know what I mean?
In their head, they're walking the
as
straight
far as
line.
they are concerned, they're walking the straight line and you can't tell they're drunk. You know what I mean? And yet, I think if you, even when you are sober and you look at yourself, if someone played the video, you're able to just tell I was totally out of my mind there. You know what I mean? And this is the challenge with some relationships you get into, like I mentioned earlier, of ladies who be in relationships with men who are not treating them right because they're good fathers or they present good father figures. Maybe they've got good value systems from home and generally love kids, but then other aspects of them don't allow them to be good husbands or good boyfriends or something like that, and they'll stick around there.
Oh my gosh.
And now what happens is it begins to take away something from you. And as long as you keep losing, because that's how toxicity works, you are losing a level of consciousness every time you are intoxicated. If you are drunk, you are losing a sense of consciousness, so you things are slower. You're slower at doing things. Your understanding or your reasonability becomes
your reality.
Your reality is messed up. It's
yeah.
compromised. So that's how it is. So even when you're in those relationships where that person, or I'm with this woman because she's the only person who believes in me. As men, we love people who believe in us. We're designed to conquer. So once you have this woman who tells you, who praises you,
take notes.
She's your number one fan.
She's
You
your
know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then on the side, when she's with her homegirls, she's there not being your number one fan. But when she's with you, and you probably know that, but it takes away something from you. But you wanna keep holding on because there's just that element that is comfortable to self. That you're saying, okay, I'll ignore that.
Yeah.
But this, it's almost like a drug, like you mentioned earlier. One of the reasons why addicts struggle with addiction is because you just want to keep going back to be in that state.
To the thing that's and the thing that fixes you is the thing that's hurting you. And I think that it helps also to answer a question that I would have asked later on, to say that why do we struggle to get out of toxic relationships? I mean, like, people try to talk you out of this. Leave this woman, she's manipulative. Leave this man, he's abusive, and all of that stuff. But a lot of people are so hooked, like almost addicted to those relationships. And I think, like, Tendai, what you just brought out really brings it out clearly. Yeah.
I was actually going to say that people get to a place in that toxic relationship where they are, like you said, comfortable, and where they feel like it doesn't get any better than this, and I think it's a dangerous place to be. But one of the things that I would like to share is whenever people are in toxic relationships, there's also the element of what comes after this.
Fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Is there someone who's going to catch me when I fall?
I know I'm falling.
Yeah.
So you're already so conscious of the amount of danger you're in.
Yes.
So you rather stay.
You know what? Others even say it's better the devil I know than the angel I don't.
Yeah.
So that's such it's so short-sighted because you're depriving yourself of all the goodness that you deserve.
Yeah.
And we stay in those toxic relationships because we think that it doesn't get better. We think that we are safer here because we are familiar here than in unfamiliar territory.
Yes.
Yet, I remember there's a story that I was once told when I was a kid of there were 3 doors, pick one. There were 2 doors, pick one. There's a gun behind the other where you die by gun, and then the other one you just don't know, you could die in any way. And everyone picked the gun because they were like, you know what, it's a bullet to the head, I'll die one shot and I'm gone. And yet the other door was really a door to freedom.
Yeah, oh my gosh. So sometimes we are so afraid of the unknown, but the thing that you have not known could be that scripture that says, more than your eyes have seen, what your mind has not been able to perceive. And I know I've just like messed up that scripture, but you know the scripture, that is what God has in store for you, even if it is the unknown.
Even if it is the unknown. I think people need to get to a place where they completely trust God to have their back.
Right.
And the reason why people stay in toxic relationships is because they don't trust God enough to have their backs. It goes back to your relationship with God. What kind of a relationship do you have with the Father? That you don't trust Him enough to know that He will take you through this, as hard as it may be.
Yes. What no eye has seen, no ear heard, and what has not entered into the hearts of man. So this is me just redeeming myself. Okay. This is so hard. Like our time is just not on our side. And I know like there's just like leaving you so full of content that we need here. I don't know how we're going to fix this, but I also want us to talk about like the times when we are toxic, because I think it's one thing to talk about being in a toxic relationship, and sometimes we get into these relationships and then we become intoxicated to the point where we don't even realize who we've become. What does it look like to be this toxic person? Is there ever a time in our relationships where, or in your relationship, where you're like, how did I become this person, you know? When did I become like this?
Oh yeah, many times. I can recall a season in my life. I mean, I talk about it now because I've been able to come out of it. But sometimes when you are in it, if you were to speak to the Fungi 7 years ago, the last season rather, yes. The 7 seasons away, you know, I definitely didn't know that I was contributing to the toxicity of the relationship. I was also a toxic person to my husband. I was so sure that I wasn't, because I was the one going to church. I was the one being mentored. I was the one who was reading the Word of God and praying every day, and he was going out drinking and popping bottles. And so I didn't realize that even with all of that going on for me, I was the toxic person, you know. And I'll give an example. I remember a season where he constantly stayed away because I was constantly badgering him about wanting him to stop whatever it is that he was doing that was affecting me, because for some unknown reason everything he did was about me, you know, and yet that wasn't the case, you know. And I feel like I became toxic because of my insecurities, and because, you know, we can't see insecurity, so then we can excuse it. Because we can't see a bad attitude. We can excuse it.
But Fundi, can you like go a little bit deeper into that if you can? Because maybe somebody's there saying, hey, you know, are you guys trying to tell me that I should not be asking my husband to treat me right? Is it okay for him to be popping bottles, right? And going out drinking? Do I not have the right to say something?
Well, we do have the right to say it out, but how do we go about it? You know, because I remember I would constantly, you're not supposed to be drinking. This is not who God made you to be. What? And I was as though he did not hear me the first time.
You know, one challenge that she wouldn't get is I heard it the first time.
But you didn't listen.
Yes, and the truth is I was going through something. And I didn't know how to deal with it.
So
I didn't know how to deal with it, and a lot of the time I actually hoped for coming home to a wife I could talk to say, "Hey, you know, I've got,
Oh my God.
I am struggling with this, or this has happened, and I don't know how to deal with this, you know." And you know, obviously I found solace elsewhere because at that time I wasn't, you know, doing any mentorship or this and that. I found my own escape
Way
place,
to cope.
you know, way to cope, you
Yeah.
know. And what I needed, not that that was right, that was definitely also not helping
Yeah.
the situation, but it was also not helping coming home to the person I thought who had better insight, because she was going to church, she was praying, that, you know, she could receive me and, you know, remind me that, look, okay, you've made a few mistakes, maybe let's start off by just praying together, or
Okay,
let's just
so
talk.
Tindekana, I just want to talk back to you because I want us to like really hear what you're saying, right? Because I think you talk about the fact. So Fungisai has got this husband who comes home and he's got like maybe an attitude, or he's just not really behaving well.
Yeah, probably has a girlfriend.
He probably has a girlfriend, you know, it's probably being nicer to someone else.
Yeah.
But then what she was experiencing was the effects of the struggles you were going through.
Yeah.
So instead of you finding an environment that allows you to deal with the pressure, the stress,
True.
and everything, you were attacked.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
And
What happens when you're attacked?
Yeah, when you're attacked, naturally you're going to go into defense mode. You know, so if you're in defense mode, you're even going to attack. You know, sometimes the best form of attack is defense. So you find that, however she would, you know, batter me about something, whether it's true or not, I would get into this defensive place, and when I could feel that I cannot handle that pressure, I would just totally, you know, lose it. So, you know, I go nights on end, not come back home, or if she came complaining about the drinking, even if I'm sober, I would then decide that day that let me just go and drink so that I give her something to talk about. And yet, in all of these, you know, things I was doing, I was only digging my hole deeper. And I was getting to a place where it was getting so hard. And the thing with our relationship is we're always friends. And of course, when you're married, you're going to be each other's best friends for a long time.
Yes.
So it's very hard already. You want to talk to your best friend and your best friend's not listening.
Yeah.
You know, so we were at this place where she wanted me to hear her music. I also wanted her to hear my music. So at the end of the day, it's just noise.
Got noisy.
It just got
Yeah.
noisy
Yeah.
for both of us.
Yeah.
And this is how in the end one is going to keep quiet. And when one keeps quiet, it makes you wonder, what are they doing now that they're quiet?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, we've got children. Once our youngest
It's
was
quiet.
making noise, it just goes quiet for 30 minutes.
You know
And
they're
they're
up to
curious
something.
that there's something
Yeah.
there. So that's what would happen. You know, it's either she'd go quiet or I would go quiet. And by the time you notice that there's now silence, you know, something else has started happening. There's now an affair.
Yeah.
There's now all sorts of things
So when you're a toxic element in the relationship, even if you go to church and you look picture perfect, when you're a toxic element, it stops you from facilitating an opportunity for your partner to heal.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, like, I remember a time a few years ago, we had both lied about certain affairs that we had had. And he knew I had had the affair with the person, and I knew he had had an affair with that person. But we chose not to say because we didn't trust each other. So we lied and we said, no, it didn't happen. The whole world was saying it happened.
What didn't you
but
trust each other with?
we didn't trust each other with the truth. We didn't trust each other with the truth.
Yeah.
And he only came to me 5 years later, and I also told him 5 years later, because now we were people who could trust each other with the truth. I was a wife that he could trust with his heart, that I would not take it and tear it
The
apart.
heart of her husband safely trusts her, Proverbs 31.
Exactly. I wouldn't take his truth and use it against him.
So what happens when we bring our broken hearts to each other? Do we trust that we can help each other heal, or do we then use it against each other?
Well, before we would use it against each
Yeah.
other. But
Always
when you get
ammunition.
to a place like the place that we got to, where we
Yeah.
realized that, you know what, he was talking about digging his own hole. The truth of the matter is, when you're now married, there is no his problem, my problem.
Come
It's
on.
our problem.
Right.
So when he cheats, we cheat
Yeah.
on the marriage.
Yeah.
So it's not about he had an affair with this girl. And it's we cheated on our vows. We
Yeah.
cheated on
You know,
our
one
marriage.
of the hardest things, Mom, was no matter how angry or upset I'd be with her, it still hurt not being with her.
With her.
You know,
Yeah.
so that's that one flesh covenant. You are fighting against yourself.
Exactly.
So that strain it's causing a lot of pain in itself. Besides
Yes.
the actual thing that's pinching
Yeah.
on the two of you. So we got to a place where I was toxic, she was toxic, and the whole situationship became toxic.
Yeah.
And it really just took a lot, and it really took God to even preserve us through that
Yeah.
time to then get to a place where we could create a platform where we said, look, what do we value the most? Do we value our relationship that much to stay in it?
Yeah.
A couple of times we even got to a place where we would say, I love you, but we can't be together because we're just bad for each other.
Yes.
You get to that place where you're
Yeah.
like, Ish, look, love is not proving to be enough here. Me and you just can't be around each other. And
Yes.
we got to that place, but we realized that whatever the case, even when we are apart, we
Yes.
still needed to fix the relationship so that we would be happier when we are not together.
Yes.
So we just then decided that if it's gonna be harder working, it's gonna be work being apart, then why not still work to be together?
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think people think that, particularly when you're in a covenant of marriage, that you just pack your Gucci bags
And you
and
go.
check into a hotel
And that's it.
and you're done with this person. But thank you for bringing out the fact that, that one flesh covenant is about the tearing apart of one flesh. And I think it also speaks into when we think about wrong relationships, that being with someone who is committed is really about tearing apart their flesh, and allowing yourself to fall into, such an emotional turmoil, which really at the end of the day isn't worth it, because there will be no success in that relationship.
It's destined to fail.
It's destined to fail.
There is no future when you are seeing someone who is committed already,
Yeah.
because then it's almost like you're wasting time.
Yeah.
You could be finding the one and you're choosing to
Who
stay with
makes you
someone.
the one?
Exactly. Someone who makes you the one,
Yeah.
someone who puts you first, being someone's first option
Right. Yes.
rather than second. And you want to settle for second because right now it feels good and you're missing out on meeting the right person because you're with the wrong person.
Yeah, someone who won't have to hide you,
Yes,
Or-
or be ashamed
or
of
be
you.
ashamed
the,
of
the
you,
loyalties
or
are
someone
very
who
clear there.
loyalties are clear.
Yeah, the loyalties are clear. If you
Yeah.
are gonna be the Airtel number in the phone,
Right.
and the one I talk to only in the bathroom, or switch off the phone completely,
Yes,
you can only
yeah.
call me after such a time. I think it's clear
Yeah.
where my loyalties
Yeah.
lie.
Or the one who be referred to as a mistake I made.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
After it's all
Yeah.
That
done
is
and
so
dusted.
It's and guys, it's hard to hear, right? But then we want to give you the wisdom to say that, look, you got to separate. I think Fungi put it so well in the beginning, that you want to be able to make a distinction between how something feels and what true love really is. But we need to wrap up, and I think that I do need you to tackle one more thing. In that, I think we want to be able to say that, in as much as we are saying that there are relationships that are not going to work, because you shouldn't be in them in the first place, I think that every relationship deserves a fighting chance, particularly, and this is in clear reference to relationships where things go wrong, because I did say in the beginning that while we are talking about relationships that are wrong, there are also relationships where things go wrong. And when things go wrong, those relationships also deserve a fighting chance. But for that to happen, you do need the commitment of the two people who are in it. And for Fungisai and Tendai, because they're people that I know pretty well and I've really walked a long journey with them, I can attest to the fact that we went from bad, in fact maybe a little bit worse than bad.
Yeah.
We went from a really bad situation to what we are now, what you are now feeding off, which is such a beautiful testimony of what God can do to restore a relationship of people who are willing. And I think that could we like bring this to a happy ending and talk to people who maybe got toxic, like, or maybe they're dealing with things like where there's been some disappointment, like people have let each other down, there's been affairs, and maybe it's a woman who has, you know, in this society who has had an affair, and like society just won't forgive her. Families are saying, no, you can't, you know, or you know, like we've made these mistakes, that we just find our relationship now as toxic. Like, what's the way out? How do we find healing? How do we pick up and move forward? What does it take?
I think one of the things that I will have to stress on is the fact that over the years, what I've learned as a wife is patience and forgiveness. I think we spoke about this at the beginning, and the importance of it. I think if things have gone wrong in your relationship, especially in marriage, there's always hope.
Yes.
I think, first of all, understanding that there is always hope.
Yes.
And also understanding that where there's hope, there's work that it needs to be done. And so if there is work that needs to be done, are you willing to do the work?
Right.
You know? And for me and my husband, one of the things that I decided as a wife is that I was going to stop placing unrealistic expectations on him. Unrealistic in the sense that because he's a man of God, he cannot make a mistake.
Right.
And which is so not true, because we are married to these amazing men who have shortcomings. We are married to these amazing women who have shortcomings. I had to get to a place where I separate who Tendai is and what he's destined for from the mistakes that he makes. I had to get to a place where I understand that what he needs from me right now is not a woman who's going to point out his mistakes, but a woman who is going to get him to a place where he understands that we can still pick up after we fall, and we can still get up. And because I chose to be that for him, I chose to be his safe place. He didn't need to have a side chick who he can tell everything to, and not come to me and tell me that, Fungi, right now I'm struggling with lust.
Right.
That is the kind of wife that I am now. He can safely come to me and say, look, honey, I'm struggling with this.
Right.
How do we? And for me, the first thing shouldn't be, hey, you're not praying enough. We need to fast. You will fast all you want, but the fact of the matter is, brother is struggling.
Yes.
And are you a safe
Is there
place for him?
safety for the work, the transformational work to happen, to take place?
Exactly.
Because maybe part of that process is going to expose you to a lot more stuff than you were willing to deal with. And I think, Fungi, thank you for mentioning that, because we are in a society where we even have preachers who say, don't stand for this, don't stand for that. If he does that, you kick him out. But is that really what it's...
That's not a solution.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a feasible solution.
You know, as a man, one of the things I always struggled with was the feeling of failure. So it was never about the infidelity itself. You know?
Okay.
Whatever relationship my wife would have, what hurt me the most was the fact that I was not able to protect her from, or be that safety net that she could come to if she's struggling with something, and had to find an scapegoat somewhere else. So by feeling like I've failed, I would also fall into this place and become this whole kind of person, you know, become miserable, really take it to the bottle, and all sorts of other things, because I was trying to think, how could I fail my queen like that, you know? But I learned over the years, like you mentioned, forgiveness and patience. That
It has to be
one
a daily
thing,
decision.
it's a daily decision. I had to start learning how to forgive myself on a daily basis. That look, whatever mistakes have happened in this marriage are not because as a man I dropped the ball per se, And even if I
Or
did,
that you meant to, you just
Yeah,
maybe
you know.
sometimes you just don't know better.
exactly, I didn't know better, and even though it's happened, mistakes like that can be worked on and fixed. And as a result, every day I found myself becoming a better husband,
Right.
and being a lot more patient and a lot more understanding and growing. Because it was a tough journey. There's a lot of the times where we would discuss. We have this place where I can go to and tell her, look, Alan looked at a girl funny. And I can't get out of my mind.
Yeah.
We have those conversations now. I couldn't have those conversations then because I knew that I was going to hold it on to the next 5 years or so. But we're at a
Or
place.
you're going to be waking up one day,
One day,
3
In the
a.m.
morning.
and I'm going to need to explain a lot of things.
So that day,
2 years ago.
so when you were wearing that outfit,
That's where you went.
that's where you went. And that's what that was about?
Right. So anything you say to cry out for help in your relationship can be held against you.
Yeah.
And that's what breaks the system down, which is supposed to bring safety. Viewers, we are out of time, but I know you've loved the Morongas. Why don't you look them up, follow them? I will personally make sure that they get their platform running and start to have these honest, uncensored, authentic relationships. Conversations on relationships, because like they said, at their worst, they never had someone say, this is as bad as it can get, but also this is as good as it can get. So we are so grateful to you for being open with us and just sharing with everybody who's listening. And I know it's a little bit of your story, but I'll give you a chance to just release some final wisdom, say something before we toast to the end of this series, and yes, see where we go from there. So any one of you can go.
Okay, I'll just say that trust God, trust the process, be patient with each other, especially if you're married. I think I really want to speak to the married woman and the married man who is there listening to this. Be patient with one another and allow for each other to grow and go through your processes. Because Mr. Moronga has overcome something doesn't necessarily mean that I'm there yet. And God will always give you the grace.
Yes.
It's always there and it's sufficient. We live in a world right now where we are told that don't put up with this nonsense. You deserve better, or you can do better. But when you're in a marriage situation, the dynamics are different. There's so much grace for each other's journeys. And I think Tendai and I have witnessed that. There is definitely grace in each other's journeys. We didn't say a lot today, but we've been through so much. And it's been beautiful just being able to see where we're coming from and where we are now, where we are able to talk to each other about anything and not feel like this will be held against me in a court of law, or not feel like this person is going to use this against me, or I will lose my party. So I think it's so important for us to just be patient with one another, to seek God in the decisions that we make where marriage is concerned, and not other people's opinions. I did share that some time ago. I shared about counseling, and that counseling is not the place where your problems are fixed. So you might be here saying, but we've gone for counseling and it's just not doing anything. No, counseling is not the place where your problems are fixed. Counseling is just a place where you are given an environment to be able to see your situation from outside. You hear yourselves clearer. You are able It's a holding
Yes.
environment.
Holding environment.
A holding environment
Yeah.
for constructive conversation.
Yes.
That's what it does.
Mm.
Otherwise, the job, the work is
Still
after
nice.
counseling,
Mm.
after you've heard your
Mm.
party and what you also had to say.
Mm.
And then now what?
Mm.
That's where your responsibility comes in.
Mm.
So be patient with one another. Again, it's so important. Forgive each other daily
Yeah.
and trust God.
Amen.
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 I think for me, relationships are work.
Mm.
No matter how we want to look at it, relationships are work. And for me, I've learned that the first relationship was my relationship with God.
Mm.
When I worked on that, all other relationships simply fell into place.
Mm.
As a husband and as a father, I realized that I've been entrusted with people's destinies.
Right.
And if you are going to step into marriage and ultimately you probably want to be a parent at some point,
Mm.
you have the responsibility of these people's destiny in your
Mm.
hands. And it is important that, you go to the author, the person who created relationships, and that is the only place you can get true strength on how to manage your relationships
Mm.
properly.
Right.
When we got married, I realized that it's not just my relationship with my wife.
Mm.
There was going to be a relationship with my children.
Yes.
There's a relationship with my in-laws,
Mm.
and anything I did, every time that I was toxic, I
Mm.
wasn't just toxic to her,
Wow.
but I became toxic to all those people, interested stakeholders, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
And it hurt them just as much as it hurt me.
Right.
When I look at it, of course, years later, that that time I could have done things a lot differently.
Mm.
So it is not worth it to learn from experience. Yeah, you can. Everybody believes that the experience will be different,
Yeah.
but generally, if the principles are the same, you're gonna get the same result.
Right.
So we always believe that ultimately, let your relationship with God be in the right place.
Right.
And trust me, it doesn't matter whether your significant other is going through something. The fact that your relationship's in the right place, He will be able to speak into that relationship
Mm.
so that it works for you.
Wow.
And everyone at the ultimate end benefits and is preserved.
Yes.
Yeah.
And gets to see the final product of a relationship that has submitted to God's hand.
Amen.
God bless you too.
Thank you
So this
so
has
much.
been our bonus lesson in our series. Thank you for breaking up with me. You'll be happy to know that this is not the last time that you are seeing Tendai and Fungisai, because we are going to, as promised, take some time to answer the questions that you have been asking right from the beginning of this series. So you'll meet with them again, and I know you're excited about that. In today's conversation, we really wanted to talk about relationships that are wrong so that we know to avoid them, because it's not going to work. But we also wanted to talk about relationships that also don't work because of the fact that we are not putting in the work. So I hope that the little bit that we have shared today has been helpful to you. Why don't you go into our comment box below, drop your lessons, drop your insights, and keep the conversation going wherever you are. Maybe somebody else hasn't had the opportunity to listen to what we've been sharing here, but you can get the conversations going, change the narrative, change the messaging in whatever groupings you find yourself in. Share a different perspective, and that is God's perspective. My name is Pastor Gladys Paswani. It's been a joy having these conversations with you. We'll get into question and answers, and perhaps one more surprise from you. We'll call it a night tonight, and we're just gonna toast to, what are we toasting to?
Wow, to a good run.
To a good run in this series. God bless you.